So today I wanted to talk about this idea. It's called pee waves. No, it's not bunches of dogs on the beach having to pee. It's waves of energy coming in from Galactic center. And I'm labeling them as pee or psychic psi waves. But they may just be simply energetic waves, and our response to them is to become more psychic. But that's the end result. The reason I'm doing this is because of a series of events that have happened to me personally over these last few days, going into early last week and then culminating, or so far, reaching a little peak yesterday with a rather bizarre psychic incident. Okay, and these are not just like regular psychic incidents where you might might get an impression that someone's going to come to the door and then they come in there. This is a little bit much more detailed, much more involved. Many people involved. It's very much like Kurt Vonnegut's idea of a karas, a meaningful association of souls that are not necessarily aware that they're connected to all these other people. In my case, I'm becoming aware that these things are happening. Okay, so universe obviously wants that. I think that may be an outgrowth of these P waves coming in, these psi waves. I don't know. We do have more energy. The data had forecast way back in like 2005 or 6, somewhere in there, started picking it up, that we would get these energetic waves coming in, the strange energies from space, and that they would have a definite impact on humans. There were lots of psychic associations, but it wasn't at that time able to be determined that the psychicness was directly related to these energies. I believe that to be the case now, having experienced it myself. In addition to the psychic aspect of this, the ability to connect with another person in a shockingly meaningful fashion in terms of information that's conveyed and how it all comes out timing-wise and all of that. It's just like, it really shocks you when you discover you're in the middle of one of these things happening. There's nothing you can do about it. You don't know how to interpret it necessarily, but it is quite clear that there is something going on here. Another aspect of this is that if you're psychic enough and attuned to yourself enough, you start picking up on the universe, the ontology, the supreme consciousness seeking the limits of its own existence. You start picking up on the ontology talking to you, right? Very specifically sending messages to you, like sort of messages that are quite clear, like go here, that kind of stuff, right? Sit down, duck, that kind of thing. It's not messing around. Many of these connections and psychic impressions can be disputed, interpreted, etc. But at this level, no. You may not understand the nature of what's going on or the grander purpose of it all, but you realize you're caught up in it. You're in a karas that Kurt Vonnegut called it, a meaningful collection of souls. Okay, it's meaningful to universe, but not necessarily known to or meaningful to us, but when we discover it, it's like a big shocking thing smacking you right in the face. Okay, so this has happened to me over the past couple of weeks. I won't go into the details. It's too bizarre to even try and describe because of all these temporal aspects, the time that it happens to another person in the same time that it's happening to you and what you're doing, et cetera, right? It's all intertied there. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but I got up at 2:15 this morning after a very late night phone call, so I'm all gritty-eyed trying to think and stuff. But at 2:15 I was awake, so I figured, okay, I'm going to come on out and just deal with the data, see if there is something there. That's why this little talk here is late, is because I just let it run. Dogs and I went down to the beach ahead of the tourists. We went around and did our little chores here this morning and came back, and the data indeed had processed to the point where I could get some meaningful connections out of it, cross-links. These are the tertiary layer of cross-links are very, very meaningful. That's a huge volume of processing. We only are into the secondary layer. And these are extremely meaningful, but you just don't have a whole lot of them. But what we do have is clearly showing that the ramping up of the strange energies from space is upon us now and is part of this year and part of our transformation, part of the boost into sci-fi world and the change of the paradigm out of the grit into the ontology. All of this stuff is all interconnected. So it's happening now. It's happened to me. I have demonstrable evidence that's been validated by other people who also had this weird spooky shit happen to them simultaneously to it happening to me, and they participated in it in their own actions and are astute enough observers of themselves to realize that they were not in their, let's call it, usual headspace or usual frame of reference when this stuff was going on. So it's quite clear to me that the ontology is speaking, right? And it's speaking to me and these other individuals. But I don't think it's limited to that in any way, shape, or form. I think the ontology is speaking, or is constantly speaking to all of us, but that these psi waves that are coming on in are boosting our ability to become aware of it. It's actually altering, in my opinion, some level of our awareness and perception. It's not changing our consciousness. You can't change that. Anyway, but our awareness of what's going on is rising, and our ability to catch these things as they are occurring is rising, at least with myself and a lot of these woo people with whom I am connected, okay? Because they are not bound by a gritology, not bound by a paradigm that limits their thinking, and they are self-examining, and they use themselves as an antenna for perception of incoming information from universe. So I look at the data, and it is confirming this, right? I do see that we've got these increased waves. These increased waves are here now, but they're going to really ramp up through March, okay? So the extent of this appears that we'll have a near-term crest in the end of March, okay, in the last few days of March. That'll be like the crest of this particular wave. It'll break, and we'll sort of relax, so to speak, right? The level of psychic tension and stuff will abate a little bit. But these things are being described in the data as that in a term. I'm going to term it as threshold waves. All right. And so I'm fairly sensitive. I keep, a good diet, keep myself in trim, and I'm aware of my vibrations. So I'm very attuned. And so thus this wave that came in crossed a threshold for me and elevated my awareness and thinking about all of this stuff, all in a big rush, very scary big rush. But beyond that, I was able to pick it up. These other individuals that were also part of this cross are picking it up. Some don't. Or they pick up the energies, they react, and they're doing stuff, but they're not aware of what's motivating them or why it's all occurring, right? But nonetheless, they are participating. So it's a validation, and also it shows me that the group is bigger than just myself, right? Anyway, the data is describing this as this year, next year, in 2027, as being a series of these psi waves breaking over our solar system. So now that we're up to a certain point in our sinusoidal motion around the galactic center, around the galactic periphery, we're up high enough to get more energy from galactic center, and the data is supporting that idea that we will indeed get more of these waves, and that they will act as what I'm calling a threshold wave. So each time we get one of these waves in, and there is no real description of periodicity, and I always distrust numbers coming out of the data sets here, but some temporal markers lead me to believe that we're looking at these things basically as like a 90-day series. 2 months out of that 90 days, 60 days out of that 90 days, it's going to be the rising wave that then crests. Then the next 30 days will be this like little pause, like the little dip between the waves cresting on the beach. And then we'll get another one. So every 90 days will be emerged into one of these new psi waves. This one appears to crest and peak at the end of March. And then so presumably April would be a slight lull, and then we'd get back into it in May, which would peak sometime around the end of June. July would be a slight lull, and there we go. So I'm expecting that this will be the way of this particular year, and it would appear from the data description that each of these cresting psi waves, each of these thresholds being crossed, will bring more and more humans into an awareness of this aspect of their particular lives, right? Of their connections to other people, of the psychic nature, of everything that's going on around them, and the ontology speaking to them perhaps, but also in a very broad level to everyone. So it's going to be a very interesting year. And I think that this is the year that we could just say that, all right, that as these things come in, these cresting threshold psychic waves, that at some point here we will cross another threshold, which will be the number of people that are aware of this, and that we can actually say that at that point marks the real shift into this new paradigm out of the gritology and into the ontology. And it looks like maybe we would get into that somewhere in this coming fall or winter, that we're going to go through a lot of these waves. It looks like the one in August, so far in the data anyway, the one in August and into September is going to bring a very large group of humanity. And so it'll be quite shocking to a lot of normies and all these other people that are not really tuned into what's going on to discover themselves in the midst of this. So it's sort of like be prepared for everybody being a little bit mentally unstable in and of themselves, uncomfortable in their skin in this coming fall as we get into September. At that point, I don't know how we're going to help these people integrate what's going on, because they live in a world where this stuff should not exist. And now they're discovering that it does exist, so that means they've got to change their paradigm. So anyway, so this is apparently the year for it. I'll do these little reports on it as we get more info. I'm going to run the data today. Maybe I've got to try and dig down into the tertiary layer to see what I can get in the way of crosslinks there. And maybe I'll have some more tomorrow on it, but that's long processing, so it may be Tuesday or Wednesday. It just depends. Anyway, guys, take care. And, if you feel some psychic shit, or if the universe tells you to duck, don't mess around. Talk to you later.